My name is Dennis McKee. I am born in March of 1932, Midwest of the United States. In 1950, I was a freshman in college, and the Korean War had begun. Some of my friends decided it was a good time to join the service, whatever that might be, rather than wait to get drafted. I decided that I would not join that day with a number of them, but that I would go home and tell my parents first and then join the following day. When I told my parents, they were bothered, of course, and I agreed with them that I would wait a few days while my dad looked around and see what he could do. So in the meantime, as I was going around, I found out about the PLC program, the platoon leaders class, the ability to finish your college education while in the summer spending 2 weeks at various Marine Corps installations, going through training exercises for 6 weeks. And then upon graduation from college, receive a commission as a second lieutenant and go to the basic school at Quantico. So that's exactly what I did. While some friends of mine did go into the service, I finished my education and was commissioned, went to Quantico. I had nobody in my family had ever been in the service, and I had no real intention of remaining in the Marine Corps. I was planning on serving my 2 years, getting out of the service, and going on with the civilian life. What I did was 6 months at the basic school. I spent 18 months at Yokosuka, Japan as a military police officer, and I did get out of the service. I was out for about 2 years and was employed in the wholesale baking industry. There were some regrets that I had about getting out of the service because I felt very strongly that I was attracted to it and I could do that. And I became disenchanted with the baking industry, the civilian life, and so on. I was employed in Kansas City, Missouri. I went to Olathe, Kansas, to the Naval Air Station and interviewed, took a physical and the various tests to go to flight school. I went to flight school in 1968 at Pensacola, Florida. I went through the normal routine of pre-flight and into Shufly Field, flying the T-34, the T-28 at Whiting Field, and going to Sherman Field, flying the SNB twin-engine plane, mostly instrument work, and then went to Ellison Field for my helicopter training. Interesting enough, as I went out to the flight line on my first helicopter flight, I met my instructor, and he had a very familiar face. His name was Edward Nixon, a lieutenant in the Navy, and the younger brother of Richard Nixon, later the President of the United States. Really a fine fellow and a very good pilot, a great instructor. So I got my wings, and as they do, the coin flip was made, and it was New River or Santa Ana, as it was called, the Marine Corps Air Facility in California. And I was selected to go to California, where I joined Marine Helicopter Squadron 363 Composite, which had HOKs and the HRS. I was assigned to fly the HRS troop carrying helicopter. Mostly had been used in the Korean War for a variety of Marine Corps missions. There were other squadrons stationed there at the time, all of which were flying the H-34, and we were looked on as the poor cousins flying the old HRS, which had a cruise speed of 55 knots and low carrying capacity. So that went on for some time, and a squadron was formed, 364, and September, I believe, of 1961, and I joined it in 1962 as it was increased in number to go on a mission to the Pacific at Johnston Island to perform duties concurrent with the upper atmosphere nuclear test series called Dominic 2, which were being conducted in the Pacific there at Johnston Island, which is several hundred miles west of Hawaii. Interesting duty during that flying the H-34. We had a squadron commander by the name of Manning Janelle, who was a major at the time, later became a brigadier general. And he had a unique way of doing it, but he had been in World War of assigning people to in the squadron to various duties. But he had been in World War II, where many pilots flew the fighters, flew their own airplane, and he assigned crews to fly in various airplanes. I was the pilot of an H-34, had a co-pilot, a crew chief, and a first mech. Names are painted on the side of the aircraft, and we were responsible for that aircraft during the entire cruise. We flew together at all times, flew no other aircraft, and it was quite a different experience, something that very few people had the opportunity to do, to witness those upper atmosphere nuclear tests going off some 250 miles in the upper atmosphere in the middle of the night, would light up the sky all the way to Hawaii, turn Hawaii into daylight. So it was quite an experience. We were there from April until November of 1962 and returned to the States, and had been selected to be frozen up, build the aircraft up, or the squadron up to strength to deploy to Vietnam to support the Republic of South Vietnam at what was called Operation Shufly, which had started out in Sac Trang, South Vietnam, and that was south of Saigon, and it later moved to Da Nang, which was in the northern part of South Vietnam, and where we were when we arrived in the very early part of 1964. The country was in a tumult at the time because the former president of the country, No Diem, had been assassinated, along with his brother, who was head of the secret police, and the governance of the country was in real trouble. So anyway, we didn't involve ourselves with that. Of course, we were doing support flights for South Vietnamese armed forces, flying them to various outposts and into combat areas, carrying supplies and so forth, evacuating wounded, working with evacuating civilians from some villages as it became necessary. Our work day basically started early in the morning, the crews, we'd have a flight schedule that would go, we would fly whatever missions were required for the day. And generally speaking, there were very few missions at night. Also, we, for the most part, flew half days on Saturday and generally had Saturday afternoon and most of Sunday off. It was generally extremely good flying. The weather, of course, could be a problem at various times of the year in the monsoonal season. And it presented a problem because we covered everywhere from Quang Ngai, which is south of Da Nang, all the way to the DMZ at the northern end of the country. And that was our operating area. And there was quite a distance. There were very few nav aids, actually only one, and the nav aid was at Da Nang. So you were flying VFR or IFR under no radar or radio facilities to aid in navigation. So at times it became quite difficult. You had to exercise good judgment in where you were, what you were doing, and how you were going to get back to wherever you were going. Most of the pilots in the squadron had the HACs, helicopter aircraft commander, had been together for quite some time, knew each other, and were very skilled at their profession. The co-pilots, H2Ps, had joined the squadron, and they became excellent in what they were doing. Unfortunately, for the remainder of the tour, even though they had become aircraft commander, they very seldom flew as aircraft commanders, just because of the way the situation worked. The squadrons in those days entered the country as a unit and departed the country as a unit. So the younger pilots suffered from that aspect of not having command pilot time, but they did a good job, and we had various missions that we flew. In thinking over my early flying experiences, comparing the HRS, say, to the H-34, it was a very vibrating type existence. The rotors and the tail rotor and the engine, and there was a great deal of noise, and it wasn't smooth. However, I do remember as a young pilot there flying the HRS, and I would look over across the field at these sleek H-34s, which were termed the Cadillac of the military at the time. And that's what they were called. There were a few other names that people had for them, but to us, flying the HRS, that was the Cadillac, and something that we were anxious to get into. So here we are in Vietnam, and we're flying the H-34, enjoying it immensely. A typical flight, let's say, with the Vietnamese might be loading up 2 to 4 aircraft on the flight line, and there would have wicker baskets with little pigs in them, or chickens, and chickens, and they would load those on the aircraft along with vegetables and so forth, all fresh items. And you would fly these items out to the countryside where the people were, and that's what they lived on. There were no boxed foods, there were no frozen foods, obviously, but they were live animals that we would fly out there. I can recall one instance personally where the pig was a pretty good sized pig, and he was in this wicker framework of a thing, and his legs were outside the wicker basket, and he became quite agitated. He or she, the pig, became quite agitated, and it was bouncing around in the helicopter. And we on the flight deck up there were asking a crew chief what was going on, and he said, "We've got a pig running wild down here. I don't know what to do." And I told him, "Well, if he gets too much trouble, just kick him out the hatch." And of course, that's what we did. And we had a missing in action pig that fell a couple thousand feet into the jungle. Might say an assassination occurred that day. But there were things like that. We would also do things like pick up prisoners that the South Vietnamese had gained Viet Cong. And generally speaking, these folks were small, maybe in 5'2" to 5'6" in height, and looked like they would weigh anywhere from 110 to 130 pounds. Small people, thin, not undernourished, but that was they were subsisted on mainly a rice and fish diet. And when they were captured, of course, they were quite nervous, quite upset at being captured, not knowing what was going to happen to them. And then to be brought into a helicopter, which they had no idea what was doing. And here is the helicopter sitting there, the rotors turning, very noisy, brought in there. And I at times would look out from my perch in the pilot seat, looking down at them being loaded, and you could see them actually, their whole body was in torment, shaking. Everything on their body was just moving so rapidly, so frightened as they were. And they had every right to be frightened. We would return them with the guards to Da Nang, and they would be taken wherever prisoners go. We didn't have any choice in the matter. I recall one time that all of our flights were not just 2 or 4 aircraft carrying resupplies out. We lost a bird to an engine problem inland, some 40 or 50 miles away. And it was decided that we would go out and try and recover the aircraft. Our CO of our squadron, Lieutenant Colonel John Lavoie, had flown in World War II, then he had flown helicopters in Korea, and he had been in a variety of jobs, highly experienced, very capable person. And I don't know an officer or enlisted person in our squadron who did not have at the time or later on anything but the highest respect for him. He was and is a great man. 93 years old right now, and still going strong. But in any case, he decided that it was time to go out and pick that helicopter up. It was an Army Huey, and we did have Army Hueys supporting our squadron because they had gunships, and we did not have guns to support going into a hot zone. So we were heading up a valley. I don't know if it was the An Hoa Valley or not, but it was going up toward An Hoa. And it was past there, going up into the mountains. The problem being, again, the weather. I happened to be flying co-pilot for Colonel Lavoie on this particular mission. We got most of the way up there, leading a flight of 16 helicopters, and this was going to be quite a mess if we got into the weather conditions. And we were getting close to doing it, and we were saying, what should we do? I said, I think we ought to turn around and get out of here. And he said, I think you're right. So he says, okay, we're making a big turn. Well, you make a big turn with a flight of 16 in a narrow valley with the clouds above you. And nobody wanted to go in the clouds. Nobody wanted to go into the trees. So we made our way back. And I can recall sometime later we were visited by a full colonel from MAC 36 at Futima, Okinawa. And he was told about this situation. And he looked around the room and he said, why didn't you just throw a thermite grenade on it and blow it up? And everybody kind of swallowed a little bit and said, well, actually, that's what we did at the end. Hey, should have done that in the first place. So that was our big thing, to try and save an Army helicopter. But it was not unusual for that type of a situation to arise, because you had very little chance of weather briefing, although we did have the Army the bird dogs, the small two-place fixed-wing aircraft from VMO, and we had two of them that were on duty with us there at Da Nang, mainly used for weather briefing for us in flight. They would go out ahead and get a good idea of what the weather was. They were a tremendous help to our program. As we flew at various places around the country there, north, we went into Hue, and the operational place was just the Citadel. They did not have Fubai, the airfield, which later came into existence. And we went to Quang Tri, which also did not have a runway. It was just an LZ in the city. There was no airfield. And of course, Dong Ha had not been built. But one of the more interesting places we went at the time was not interesting. It became very interesting was Khe Sanh, which is in the northeast, northwest section of South Vietnam, in a plateaued area upper, probably 1,800 feet above ground. This was a place that we visited. It had an old dirt French airstrip there. And we were up there. We would work from this small little field and fly to a mountaintop called Tiger Tooth Mountain, Old Tiger Tooth it was known as. And the Vietnamese had established a radar spot up there on top of that place. It was almost inaccessible by ground. You had to be a mountain climber to get up there. And the only way the helicopter would be able to get in was to fly into the wind, into the spot, because it was about 7,500 feet of altitude, and the H-34 was limited in its capabilities, hot weather and altitude, and the load we were carrying, which was resupplying this Vietnamese outpost. And you would fly into the wind till you got right near the spot, and then turn the place, because you could only get one wheel on the ground. And with the one wheel on the ground, you would unload and take off anybody that was due to come out or whatever. And then you would actually lift up, turn on the lift power, turn on the throttles and collective up, and fall off the side of the mountain. You would just literally fall down until you got lift, translational lift, and you were able to fly out of the thing. There were, Colonel Lavoie was always concerned about how we were going to be able to accomplish our mission without putting pilots and crew members in danger. And on some missions, which were considered to be out of the ordinary, he had designated some people, we had designated section leaders, division leaders, flight leaders and extra special flight leaders, he called them. And what we had were these lads that would go up there and do things that he felt that they were more capable with, simply because they had a great deal more flight time. And I had gotten into the warrant officer program in 1961 because I was a reserve officer, and the reserve officers at the time appeared as though they were not going to have a long life on active duty in the Marine Corps. So inability to make a regular commission, the Marine Corps decided that they would have warrant officer helicopter pilots. So I was one of those that became a warrant officer helicopter pilot. So I had quite a bit of time in the bird, and he would, some of our department heads, the rank of major, had a great deal of flight time, but most of it was in jet aircraft, and they had recently transitioned into helicopters because we had a shortage of qualified people to be the department heads in the squadron at that rank. So unfortunately, many of these folks, even though they became hacks in the squadron, were not necessarily division leaders or even section leaders. Some of them, from the executive officer through the operations department, supply, and maintenance departments. So this a little friction developed as there were some of the considered junior officers and warrant officers who were the hacks who were doing missions that were considered to be a little more edgy than some of the others. But those missions up off of Quezon were quite difficult. It would get quite windy up in the mountains. You had to be extremely careful about being in a downwind situation or a wind gust on the side of those things. And we did have one plane that did not get out, rolled down the hill. He had flown off, but he had never regained his lift properly, and landed in the jungle and did a roll down. And he, unfortunately, was one of these transition pilots who had been a jet aviator. So it enhanced Colonel Lavoie's decision to go with only the most experienced pilots to do it. But Quezon at that time, as I said, the French airstrip was just out there in the sun all by itself. The red dirt of clay of Vietnam was there. We'd go out there, nice and cool up in the highlands. You have your box lunch. We'd sit outside the airplane, and it was just a nice summer's day, as you might say. But nothing like it would be in 67 and 68 when the siege of Quezon was taking place. It became a whole different ballgame. But as I say, we were there early, and it was thing. I had one mission one time that was quite interesting. A flight of two, and I don't think I've ever told this story before because we did keep it quiet. The pilots and I. There was myself as a section leader and 3 lieutenants flying with me. The mission was to a simple resupply mission, fly from Da Nang to the Citadel at Hue, pick up some supplies, and fly into the Ashau Valley and drop them at the Alui airfield. And there were 8 loads, so we were going to make 4 trips out there. There were no nav aids, so we were doing it with maps. So everything is jungle. It's very difficult. So we were just doing a VFR and flying as best we could to get over to the thing. And the weather was not good and worsened as the day went on. So we flew to Al Louie and over the hill, and as we came into the Ashaw Valley, lo and behold, there was Al Louie a few miles down the hill, and we landed, dispatched our cargo, and went back to Fubai, refueled, reloaded, and back out, do the same thing, and noticed that the weather was getting a little lower over the last ridge line, which led into the valley. The third trip out there, the weather was even worse, and what I did notice the first time we had gone out there was that the green of the jungle, interestingly enough, at one point, and for what reason, I have no idea, there were different shades of green. And this one shade of green was a lighter shade, and it was almost in a V shape and came to a point near the top of the ridgeline. And I used that on the second flight out there as an aiming point as we were flying along. And sure enough, you fly over that V point, and there it was. There was a valley, and we went down into it. So the third flight went along, and the fourth flight went along. And as we were going out there, the bird dog aircraft that had been supplying us with weather and other information landed at Al Louie and suffered a broken tail wheel. So this was on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday. It might have been a Saturday. It might have been a Saturday. And he was sitting on the ground, and as we approached that V, light colored jungle V there on we noticed that the weather had settled down over the ridge line. And as I looked ahead, I thought, well, it's time to turn around and head back to Way, because we couldn't get into the valley VFR. And I hear the pilot on the radio of the bird dog saying, "Hey, you guys come getting it down. I don't want to spend the weekend out here. You won't be out here until Monday morning. Come on in and get us." So I looked at the sign, and what I could see of that green V of mine, I could see about the V being stopped by the clouds had settled down over it, and I figured it was about 100 feet below the top of the ridge line. And I said, well, I might try this. So I told the wingman, I said, you stay here and circle, and I'm going to fly up there and go on down, which I did. And my co-pilot says, "You're going to go IFR up there?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so. We can do that." So what I did was fly up and went into the clouds and started counting. 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4, 5 potatoes, 6 potatoes, 7 potato, more. That's about far enough, and lowered the collective, and lo and behold, there we were in the valley with Al Louie right ahead of us. So I called my wingman, and I said, we made it through the thing, and we're in good shape now. Why don't you go on back to wait for us? We'll find another way out of here. You go on back to Way Citadel. No answer. And I called him again. No answer. I called him again. No answer. So I was making turns this way and that way, kind of looking. And all the time, he was right behind me. He had followed me right up into the clouds. He had followed me right up into the clouds. And when I came out, he had followed me all the thing in a tail chase right behind me. As luck would have it, he came down the same way. We landed. We let off the passengers. Got off our bird dog people. He left his airplane there, and there was also an Army a gunship there in the valley. And he said, listen, he said, there's a way to get out of here going down south. He said, the south end of the valley, and you can get out of here and then go up the river valley back to Citadel. I said, fine. He says, the only problem is down there where you make the turn to get out of this thing, which is about 20 miles south. He said, there's some activity in there, and we took some fire there earlier. So he said, what you do, he said, you follow me, and I'll be a couple miles ahead. When we get some fire, I'll engage them, and you sneak on by and go out the valley. So that's good. And that's what we did. And another reason that we felt at the time was a good thing to have were gunships. Army was great. We wanted Marine gunships. And this was something that all of us who were flying at the time felt. We had the M60 on one side of the plane and an M60 on the other side. But it was nothing like having a gunship around. And the Army guys were just, they were our best friends. We were comrades in arms during that entire trip out there. We developed some very, very close relationships with them. So in any case, we did get back to Fubai, or pardon me, to the Citadel, refueled, and then headed home, and had an adventuresome time getting home because the weather had settled down over that part of the country, and we couldn't get over the pass on the way to Da Nang, and had to go around. And we were actually probably flying about 100 to 200 feet in the air, and it was misting and raining and cloudy, and it was a real tough road. Had no idea, no radio aids, but when we did finally get around the corner to go into Da Nang Bay, the sun opened up. It was a beautiful day in Da Nang, and we flew back in. It was Saturday afternoon. Most people were taking the afternoon off, and we went in and just shook each other's hands and said, that's just one more mission we got, right? How did things go out there, guys? We had a little weather, and we picked up so-and-so who had a problem with his front dog. Well, that's good. That's about it. Yeah, that's about it. So that was the end of one mission, and that was, although we didn't take any fire and didn't have any problem, and all it was lifting some good cargo out to our Vietnamese friends and coming back. It did get a little more complicated, and you never knew from start to finish on any mission you went out, they didn't always go as you had planned or hoped they would go. As we were getting close to leaving the country, which occurred at the end of May of 1964, a large mission came up carrying a battalion of South Vietnamese troops from Quang Ngai Airfield back into the mountainside and engaging what was considered to be a North Vietnamese battalion or larger, which had crew-served weapons as opposed to just the small firearms that we had been attacked with before. So we had our full squadron out there of 18 helicopters and 4 Army gunships. I believe there were 18. There might have been more than that, but I believe 18. 4 flights of 4 with a 2 trail. One was the maintenance bird, one was the SAR bird. Pick up anything. I happened to be on the flight as the SAR crew that day. And we flew out on the first thing, probably about a 20-minute flight, 25-minute flight. And as we got close, we were told by the gunships that were probing the area, and they had called South Vietnamese fixed-wing aircraft of ADs, as we know them, the AD designation, big, strong support aircraft were bringing fire to bear on these crew-served weapons and the South Vietnamese or the North Vietnamese that were in there. So the recommendation was that we go back to Quang Ngai and wait until they made successive runs down there and get some of the crew-served weapons quieted down. As we turned to go out and head back home, one of the ADs took some sort of a round, began smoking, and later on the way back, he had to parachute out of the aircraft, out of his AD, which was unflammable, and it did crash. One of our pilots flew down and picked up the pilot of that aircraft, whose son wrote a famous book, and I'm sorry that I can't recall his name, but they later emigrated to the United States, and the son now, I believe, lives in Southern California and is serving as a congressman to the United States. It was a difficult time. We lost a couple of aircraft out there that day, and fortunately, although we had some people wounded, there was nobody killed. But it was 4 trips into these zones with 18 birds, and it was, if you've ever experienced tracers and white phosphorus coming at you, it's quite an experience. You tend to tunnel in your vision and concentrate on the target and forget about these because there's not much you can do about them. So that was a thing, and there were many awards. There were 2 Silver Stars presented that day, and the aircraft commanders were awarded Distinguished Flying Crosses. So it was considered to be quite a difficult thing. There was one other person there. The lead pilot of the Army gunships was recommended. He was a captain. His name was Jack Woodmansee, and Jack was later to attain the rank of lieutenant general in the Army. And he was recommended by Colonel Lavoie for a Navy Cross. Somewhere it was lost in the paperwork mill of Army, Marine Corps, and so forth. And years later, we heard that he had received a single missionary medal for his work that day. And he personally had saved, we consider, many Marine lives. So there was an active petition done among our squadron mates in 364 to see what we could do. He was later awarded, many years after retirement, the Silver Star. So I left the squadron. I was transferred to Quantico, Virginia, with the Presidential Helicopter Squadron. I flew in the Presidential Helicopter Squadron for 3 years. I flew then, I went back to Vietnam, and I was flying C-130 cargo aircraft for a tour in Vietnam. And after that, I went back to Quantico and spent 4 more years in the Presidential Helicopter Squadron. I flew as a pilot for, I flew Lyndon Johnson while he was president, Richard Nixon while he was president. I flew General Eisenhower, former President Eisenhower, after he had retired and he was living up at his Gettysburg farm. We would bring him down to Walter Reed Hospital for doctor's checkups and so forth. And it was a great experience. I had more tours. I went back to the Pacific and flew in Okinawa for another year or so. Retired as a major in 1976. Great career. But I think my experiences in 364 with the people, uh, the officers and men in that squadron. Well, I guess it sticks with me as the most important and rewarding most rewarding part of a great career. So, uh, happily now, 81. Thank you very much.